What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so look, I will be covering the NBA, but it's going to be more extensive during the playoffs. And right now, I'm probably just going to follow the more marquee teams. Okay, Lakers, Clippers, Rockets, maybe Portland. It's just for time reasons, you know what I'm saying? It's not really possible for me to report on games that I probably haven't been able to watch. So I could do a summary, scores, but it's just going to be harder for me. It's going to be easier for me to do the playoffs because I know when all those games are going to be on, I can watch those games. It'll just be an easier format for me to follow. But I do want to say this, though. Despite all of the hype and hoopla and the cheerleading that comes from the sports media or the media, the Lakers do look beatable. And I do notice it's very hypocritical that when the Lakers lost to the Rockets the other day, they all made, note that it was the LeBron-less Lakers. But when the Lakers lost during the regular season when AD wasn't playing, I noticed that they would say things like the narrative would be, well, LeBron didn't get help from his teammates. Other people didn't step up, but they didn't do that with AD. They're saying he needed to step up in the absence of LeBron. That's why a lot of people, most players don't want to play with that guy because you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. You know what I'm saying? But this video, I want to talk about something I noticed with Wilt Chamberlain, right? So I was looking at a video on Wilt Chamberlain archive that was uploaded a couple of days ago, and it was one of the rare videos where Wilt was not the tallest person in the room. And it kind of reminded me of a video I uploaded some years ago where it was a picture of Shaq standing next to Yao Ming, and Yao Ming looked enormous in that photo. And then in that video, I was saying, is Yao Ming bigger than we think he is? So, but the thing I noticed about Wilt in that video is that the guy supposedly standing next to Wilt was 7'5", right? Now, of course, this was from the 1970s when Wilt was still in his absolute physical prime. Now, Wilt is listed as 7'1", but when you look at the video, Wilt still doesn't look that much shorter than the 7'5". I can't remember. I think he was Chinese. I'll just say he was an Asian basketball player. But Wilt, I've always noticed something about Wilt. Wilt is listed as 7'1". Now, obviously, Wilt is not quite as tall as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but Wilt always looked so massive. Like, he doesn't look like your standard 7-footer. He looked like a guy. Like, I don't know what it is about Wilt, but he just looks so much bigger than 7'1". And it dawned on me. Sometimes I forget that 7'1" measurement is not the same as your modern day measurement. Up until last year, I think. Remember, up until last year, they measured players in their shoes. And with the type of shoes they have now, with all of the insulation and cushion, these shoes can add well over an inch to your height. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes even a little bit more than that. When Wilt was playing, he was playing in, Chuck Taylors, which didn't provide much insulation, didn't provide much comfort to these players. So, Wilt, in his era, they were measured barefoot. That's why Bill Russell is listed at 6'9", but In the 90s and early in 2000s, he'd been listed as maybe 6'10.5". So in the modern day listings, Wilt would probably be 7'3", because remember, barefoot, he was in his prime, 7'1", and I remember 1/16 inch. So he was just over 7'1" barefoot. So if you put him in some modern day kicks, you put him in some Air Force Ones, then all of a sudden Wilt is 7'2.5", rounded up to 7'3". So he would be a much taller guy, or listed as a much taller guy in today's NBA. So, yeah, he's a very massive guy. I remember seeing a photograph of Wilt back in the 1990s, and I can't remember whether it was a Madison Square Garden game, or I'm assuming it was a Madison Square Garden game. And he was on the court, and he was interacting with both Patrick Ewing and Shaquille O'Neal. This was young Shaq, the Shaq in Orlando. And Wilt was considerably taller than both of them. Now, Shaq was listed as 7 feet, or 7'1" at the time. But Shaq even admitted I think he might have, in his prime, he might have barely scratched 7 feet barefoot. And I think he said that he's now like 6'11" and some change. So, Patrick Ewing was listed as 7 feet, but Ewing probably was more like 6'10.5" or something like that. Maybe 6'11". So, I've always noticed that Wilt was, this really, really massive guy. And he's a combination. He's a combination of a guy who, when he was younger, he was sort of skinny-ish. Okay? But he looked skinny, but he was still listed as, if you look at Wilt in high school, when he was in high school, he was about 240. Okay? He was 7 feet, 240 in high school. And then when he was in college, he was 7'1". That's when he had his final growth spurt, 7'1", about 250 or so in college. And then I think his first year in the pros, I think he was about 260, 7'1". And then by his third season with the Warriors, the 50-point per game season, he was 7'1", 275. And he was slowly starting to fill out. But he was pretty much when you looked at him, he was on pretty much all muscle. You know what I'm saying? You didn't really see any fat on Wilt at all until his latter Lakers years. And that was a little bit of fat. He might have had at that time maybe 6% body fat, maybe. He still was a remarkable, specimen, and by that time, though, Wilt was probably 305, 310. I think the heaviest he ever was 315. But he wasn't a fat guy. I'm not saying Shaq was fat, but Shaq was a different shape. Shaq carried a lot of excess, and still to this day carries a lot of excess. I'm not criticizing him. I'm carrying excess, so I can't. I'm not criticizing. I'm just speaking, facts here. But yeah, it's just one of the things I've noticed about Wilt, man, is that he definitely is bigger than we think he is, and we can't really, and we definitely can't compare him to a lot of these modern day players. And and the reason why I'm making this video too is because I'm noticing something too. All right, this is something I wanna address. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about giving kudos to these guys, I remember that idiot caller on Ticket Show one time talking about I've been capping for Bob Cousy, whatever the fuck that means. Look, at the end of the day, I want you guys to take notice of something. I mentioned this before. When I was growing up, right, in the late 80s and early 1990s, when I was growing up as a kid into my teenage years, the greatest players, the greatest forwards, it was the three Bs, okay? It was Bird, Baylor, and Barry. Those were the three great forwards, along with Julius Erving. Of those three Bs, the only one that they really talk about now is Bird. Elgin Baylor doesn't get mentioned. Rick Barry is now not even, he's sort of underrated. People talk about how he will only be like a 3-point specialist in this era. And when you say that, they're like, wow, you don't even know his fucking game. Have you watched Rick Barry? But you know, that's what's current. Sugar Ray Robinson was the GOAT when I was growing up. Now Sugar Ray Robinson has been replaced by Muhammad Ali as the GOAT. And look, I love Muhammad Ali, but I don't think that he was the GOAT boxer. Now, he could have been the GOAT heavyweight, but even he would have told you he wasn't the greatest boxer of all time. You know, Sugar Ray Robinson to me, Henry Armstrong, Sam Langford. Well, technically Sam Langford, was he heavyweight? Oh, light heavyweight maybe. You know, there are certain guys like that don't get mentioned anymore. Sam Langford, you know, just so many fighters who are in that realm that people don't talk about anymore. And I think a lot of that is because of that generation has died out or retired that grew up watching these athletes. You know, grew up watching that generation. If I say the name, you know, Jim Thorpe or Red Grange, people might think I'm talking about like some television movie stars, you know, some television characters. And that comes from the fact that that generation has died out. They're not able to tell that story anymore. They're not able to present that agenda. And now we look at the grainy footage and say, oh, these guys are a bunch of bums. But you know, that's coming for us too. No matter how much I talk about Jordan and this generation, one day my voice will be silent and everybody else's in my generation will be silent. And people are going to forget about Michael Jordan. And one day, I think LeBron James will supersede Jordan. As much as that pains me to say that, but it's the truth. I'm a realist. People don't understand me, man. I don't have a fucking agenda on this channel. I'm telling you what I really think. And even with people that, you know, think LeBron's the GOAT, one day, many moons from now, your generation is going to be silent, and there's going to be another guy out there, and the agenda will be that guy's the GOAT. And the eyewitnesses to LeBron's play will no longer be here. That's why I believe in the preservation of history. That's why I believe in talking and making videos about players, athletes of the past. You know what I'm saying? Hell, even leaders of the past. Because they're being forgotten. They're really being forgotten. Honestly. Yeah, and like I said, it pains me, man. Like, Wilt had a lot of holes in this game. But no one can question his dominance, his individual dominance. Okay, at the end of the day, even though he only won 2 championships, and you can say that Wilt may not have been as dominant in the playoffs as he should have been. But when you look at the whole picture, and you look at a lot of the advantages that the Celtics had at that time, for Wilt to still hold 2 titles is very, very impressive. You know what I'm saying? Nobody really holds it against Jerry West, you know, as much as they do against Wilt, that Jerry only got 1 title. Oscar only got 1 title. And Oscar got it as a supporting player, not the main guy. Okay? But people hold it against Wilt that he only won 2 championships. Never mind the fact that those 2 teams, partially because of Wilt's contribution, were 2 of the greatest teams ever, the 67 76ers and the 72 Lakers. You know what I'm saying? But unfortunately, during the meat of his career, he was going up against a juggernaut team in the Boston Celtics that nobody could beat in the NBA. Nobody was beating them. They were the Golden State Warriors times 3. Bill Russell, as I said, in another video, during his career played with 12 All-Stars. 12. Do you hear me? Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 5, not 10, but 12. 12. 12. So, I mean, look, if you're Wilt Chamberlain and you're Oscar Robertson, and look, specifically Wilt, at least Jerry West had Elgin Baylor and, you know, Rudy LaRusso and Gail Goodrich. You know, at least Oscar had, you know, Jack Twyman, you know, and I think he had, who else did he have on that team? He had another star on that team. Can't remember right now. But at least he had some other stars on that team. Well, when he was with the Warriors, you know, I mean, he had Guy Rogers, a point guard, but he was smaller. The point guard didn't have the same, you know, responsibility or role back then. He had an aging Paul Arizin. I think he had Tom Gola, but he did not have the superstar level players on his teams that the other guys had. So for Wilt to come on those teams and actually make them contenders, I don't know. I just think people need to take a second look at Wilt. I'm not saying that you have to believe he's the GOAT. I don't think he's the GOAT. But there's a reason why he was looked at as the GOAT for so many years. By people that actually watched the NBA back then. The elevation of Bill Russell has only come since, you know, there's been this push for championships, which honestly has come since the Jordan era, since the Tom Brady era, where it's all about rings, you know what I'm saying, and not your actual individual dominance, you know what I'm saying, because, I don't know. But that's pretty much all I got to say, man. Tell me what you guys think.